You know a lot of people, but how many of them really have your back? Most business owners have contacts, clients, and acquaintances, but very few have real brothers. Today we're breaking down why networking is overrated and why every man needs a true brotherhood. Because no one wins this game alone. Let's get into it. All right, guys, welcome back to today's podcast. Today we're going to talk about brotherhood versus networking, how to build meaningful friendships as an entrepreneur. We're just going to talk about the different stories that we've had on why we find relationships and building relationships hard as an entrepreneur, specifically at networking events, and how there's better ways to build that friendship inside of groups like masterminds and men's groups. Joe, go ahead and kick it off for me.
Yeah, man, I think this is a really interesting topic to talk about because I have been a part of, I've gotten coaching from at least 3 different organizations at this point in my life, maybe 4, depending on how you look at it. You know, and there's one-on-one mentoring, there's group coaching, and then there's like mastermind groups. And some businesses seem to be like exclusive for different types, and some kind of do a little taste of all of them. So, back before we met each other, so I met Trevor before I met Danny, and everybody talks about networking, like go to your local chamber of commerce, whatever it might be, and meet people, talk to people, and all that stuff is great, but it doesn't really solve a big issue that a lot of us deal with in terms of having some deeper conversations and like a feeling of belonging that we're looking for, like we maybe all had before we had a business. And back when I met Trevor, I was a part of Fitness Revolution, and all I did was go. It was like a mastermind. Mostly what I did was go to live meetings, and they were awesome, and that was how I started getting to know people. But until we got put into a group together, did I really experience brotherhood, like where we spent a lot of time together. And over the years, I've had mentoring from different groups, and I had the opportunity this past year to go to a really big conference with a mentoring group. And it's a company that mentors me now, and it's great. I love it. But the conference was 1,000 people or more. And I hadn't been to a conference that big in a long time. My past experience was I knew Trevor, I knew Danny, I knew Dwayne, I knew Marshall, I knew the other guys in our group. And then we went to a conference together. So with all of us there, I found that not only did we network, but we could get into deeper relationships with people. And then I would continue to foster those relationships like with you guys. I didn't know how much I needed that and how much that mattered until I went to a different conference, and at that larger conference, without having those kind of pre-made relationships. And whether, I could put myself out there, meet people, talk to people, go talk to presenters, all that good stuff, go out to eat with them afterwards. But it just wasn't the same. It didn't provide the same value because I didn't have, I hate to keep using the same word, but I didn't have that brotherhood feeling, or I didn't have somebody there that I could fully trust and tell the things that I wanted to tell. And maybe that's not a fair expectation to have of a conference, but I think once you've experienced that, you tend to start to look for that when you go to other conferences, because that's what I've experienced in the past. That taught me the difference between networking and actually being a part of a brotherhood and having those deeper relationships with people that you can share real things with and get into deep conversations with, and also solve business problems at the same time. Because when I went to that event and I didn't have that there, it just wasn't the same. It didn't bring me as much value. It didn't make me it made it so that I didn't really want to go back the next year. Because I personally, just from having these relationships with you guys, I would go to most events just to have that opportunity to be with you guys and also meet new people and have those conversations, regardless of the topics being presented to an extent, because I know that the experience is going to be different. But when I go to conferences and it's with 1,000 other people, it's large, I don't have that particular group that I know I can lean on and that I can trust. It's just not the same. It taught me that there was a significant difference between going somewhere and networking, starting to form maybe some relationships, and then having a group of trusted people or just one person that could have same level conversations with me.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about that, I think about those conferences that we were at a lot. And because I had you guys, I always had like that safety net that I could go out and have a random conversation with somebody else and know that like if that conversation died, because it happens a lot at networking events, you like have like that first initial conversation and then conversation dies and you're like feeling super awkward. You'd always have that group to kind of go back to as well to be like, here's the guys that I know I can always keep having a conversation with. It in many ways it actually gave me more confidence in networking groups to have a trusted friend or trusted somebody there with, because then maybe like me and Joe would go over and talk to a random person together because we knew we were going to have a conversation. We kind of bring them into that conversation. It was never like we were standoffish at those, like, oh, it's only like our group of people and we don't talk to anybody else. It actually gave us confidence to bring other people into these conversations because you knew there could be depth in these conversations with the other person. So just like relating back to what you're talking about with those groups, I haven't been to a big conference since those things, honestly, for the nerves. Exactly what you're talking about, Joe, is I am not. It's funny. Most people probably wouldn't think of me as an introverted person, but I am very introverted in many ways. And so I don't do well in those big group settings. And networking in the large group conferences, like you're talking about, what is just scares the crap out of me in many ways. But also, it's like because of the issue of like I'm not afraid to go talk to somebody, but people are so awkward to keep conversations going
Mm-hmm.
that it makes it kind of hard to do that. So I definitely feel like I would get the confidence of those networking things, having that friendship or that relationship there. And it helped me value more as I've gotten older how important those are, because when I first started in business, when started my gym, is a big thing was going to networking groups because we went to an area I knew nobody. We moved to Chicago area. I was from Iowa, knew not a single person. So the only way for us to get to know people is we had to go to these networking groups, and they were usually older people. Very few people at my age, is 27 years old, so very few people my age. And man, they were so hard because first of all, everybody there was just trying to get leads. It was like truly transactional. It was just like, who do you got for me? And it's like, no, this
Mm-hmm.
was not for me. And it very quickly got out. I got turned off by going to networking things, and even like that kind of made me feel that way with conferences too. Because when we first started going to conferences originally, I would go with my other business partners, and we'd have like our little core little conversation. But if we didn't weren't good at outreaching to other people until I joined like our mastermind men's group, and we were able to create those relationships and confidence in those conversations to then bring people into those same conversations we were having. But it was very transactional when I think of networking. Like, truly, if I think of networking, is I think of it as like somebody's expecting something back from this. And overall, like mastermind groups or men's groups have changed my opinion that it should be, maybe transactional is still the right word, but it's a relationship between the two. Like it's give and take back and forth on conversations, not on like getting a lead or a number, because the conversations that I have now with people when I go to other networking events that I go to now is I am always looking to like serve them and have really good conversations with them because I've seen how impactful that is in like our groups. And so when I do that and have those conversations, I always get feedback from people that are always like, man, like thanks for being not awkward at this networking event. Thanks for
Mm-hmm.
like actually having a conversation, having a relationship. And then we have, there are people that I have referred people off to because I've created a relationship with them, but versus somebody that I'm just trying to get a lead from or something. Like I have nothing to refer off to. I know they do insurance, but I don't know who this guy is.
I like the word transactional like that, Trevor, and that's
I
kind of
agree.
like that's where my head goes when it comes to networking because that's exactly any experience I've had with networking is it's very like I guess the way I'm thinking of it is any networking event I go very similar situations a little bit older than I am, you know, some of them know each other a lot, everything there. And it's like they might not care or like your business, you know what I mean? Or it doesn't directly affect them. So they might not really care to engage in the conversation, right? So, but I think a lot of it is very like, I almost think of it as direct transactional, right? Like lead for lead. Like you help me get customers, I'll help you get customers kind of thing, whatever it is, which is not bad, right? But it's a much different scenario where like, if Joe, you and I in the Brotherhood group are having a conversation, it's more of like an indirect transaction, right? Like I'm going to do something, I'm going to give you advice, I'm going to help you with something, whatever it is, expecting nothing in return. But I do know, like, maybe down the
Hmm.
line, like for instance, like you're a great leader, and I, not that I'm a bad leader, but it's not my innate normal process, right? And so like for you, you might give me some help down the line of like becoming a better leader or whatever it is, right? And I think that's the key, is giving help and advice and doing things that has no correlation. Like, Joe, if you do well or you do bad, it doesn't, like, it's not a direct tie to me. You know what I mean? So, or meaning like it's
Yeah.
not, I'm not part of your business, right? So and I'm not expecting anything from you, and you're not expecting anything from me. It's solely based around the brotherhood or the bonding of helping each other and wanting to see each other succeed, that where that kind of comes into fruition of the benefit of it. Does that make sense? Like kind of what I'm saying? And like, I think it's like when that happens and we get to know each other really well, like networking has no comparison to something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, networking is transactional, whereas what we're building in this brotherhood is based on trust. We
Yeah.
happen to have years of that, right? Like, I think when you build trust, when you trust somebody, it's almost impossible not to also care about what they're doing,
Yeah.
and you want to help them, not just because you want to be useful, but you want to provide them something that worked for you because you want them to be as successful or more successful than you, because we can all raise each other up. And it's different than going to a networking event where it's exactly what you guys said. It's transactional. I'm like maybe I'm rooting for your business at this networking event, but not to the level that I care directly about the businesses of these guys that I have built this relationship with.
Where you're like more invested in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'll spend time at 10:30 at night talking to you when you have an issue with a staff member or something like that,
Yeah.
right? That you need to solve by like tomorrow. And it's not locked. You can come in. It's my wife. We're having trouble with the door, but I wouldn't do that for like another random business.
Yeah. And I
I
think,
think the
and
word
it's
that you
like,
said, Danny.
yeah, I just like real quick, Trevor, like the like investment factor without the emotional connection in terms of, so like if I'm like I want to see your guys' business succeed, right? I want to see it be very successful. I want to do anything I can to do it because I'm invested in you as a person, right? But I also don't have that emotional connection as if like a business partner or a member of your staff or things like that, where that is like the perfect blend for really helping somebody be successful and succeed, because you're not expecting anything in return. You don't have that emotional connection of like, well, but I really love this part of my business. You know what I mean? Like where like a staff member might, right? And I know from you two in particular, and all of our group, is like, you guys have taught me a ton. You've helped me with a ton of stuff. You've challenged me and pushed me way more than anybody has. And I'm not going to get that from like a networking event. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think
Well,
a
that's
good
what
story. Well, go ahead, Trevor.
sorry. Yeah, that's where I was going to just tie into the word investment that Danny keeps using, because I think it's a perfect word. Is I've used that specifically when I'm creating relationships now, because we have created such a strong bond, and I've seen that how that bond has like tenfold, 10x in our businesses. Period. Like that stuff, and I've used that now working in my own in business to level up. Is I always think about that as we do things, is like I'm investing in their businesses, because by investing in their business, it's going to be back and forth. So when I work with a client, I always get this like, I mean, it's amazing how I get this back a lot, how invested you are in my business. Because when I send them off something, I give them a little bit more than they ever expect from a marketing agency, right? And so, but that I was kind of taught that through our mastermind, because like the more I give you guys, the more you give back. And I kind of like, I can't remember what that word is.
Yeah,
There's a specific term
reciprocity
for that.
or reciprocate. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can never say
Reciprocity.
it. Yeah, yeah, I
exactly.
can never say it. I don't know
Uh,
why I can never say that word.
so that idea is like that has helped me in so many aspects since I've actually been part of something like that, because I've never really, besides family based things, I've never really seen it outside of that. And so it's when I started to see that and started to see that investment, it's amazing how it really does trickle down into so many aspects. And I wouldn't call people that I'm working with friends, like in a sense that I don't, in terms of like clients of mine. I'd probably call them clients more than friends, even though I do think I've done a really good job trying to create friendships with them. But I do think about it in the terms of like, what would I do for a friend? That's what I'm going to do for all customers or people. And when I go to networking groups now, I think about that as like, I want, because I'm still doing these networking groups personally in my local area, meaning like in where I live in Prescott, Arizona, like that's, I'm doing these things. And so I'm like, man, this person could become my next best friend. I kind of think about it that way a lot. Not that I'm looking for that specifically. But like the idea is like, because Joe, I'm going to use you because I met you way before I met Danny. I would have never, not that when we first met, it was awesome, but like, I don't know if I would have guessed that you're going to be one of my best friends of my entire life when we
Mhm.
met in Greenville, South Carolina. I never would have guessed that. And now like I text you literally every day.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
kind of impressive that like, you never know if you're one conversation away from that person being your next best friend, right? To add to that list. And so I think about that a lot because that has happened in this group. And when we add new people to our groups, like we just added one recently, and like even though I know Adam pretty well beforehand, but I mean pretty well in the sense that I know him more than most some other owners, but like I know that like we're going to become great friends because I have a strategy, truly a strategy that we use consistently. Is like I'm going to invest in this person so intensely that they're either one not going to want to like even do anything with me because they can't give back that same investment because like, oh man, this person's invested so intensely, I can't reciprocate this. So because of that, people will naturally pull themselves out of those relationships, not negatively, just because they're like, hey, I feel bad taking so much stuff from you,
Mhm.
or that person's going to reinvest in me so intensely it's going to change their life as well.
Yeah, dude. I think about the conversations you have with folks who are a part of your business that aren't staff. So, like, because I was just having this conversation with somebody literally yesterday, because we've got business owners as a part of my business, clients that are also business owners. And there's a restaurant owner that I'm thinking of right now, but there's also a local coffee shop owner. And I was thinking about these conversations earlier, and they ended very similarly. So the conversation got a little deeper in between whatever it was we were doing as it related to business specific stuff. I think we were talking about tariffs and taxes and the cost of food, because that's a very hot topic right now with political stuff. And this person was a restaurant owner. But even another time in this coffee shop down the street called Mattermore, I was able to have a conversation with one of the owners. And when we dive into something business related, right, that we might both be struggling with, it's when I go to give to them, to offer advice based on things I've experienced after I've listened to what they're talking about. Um, you'll notice oftentimes you'll get interrupted a lot, or before you can finish the advice you're trying to give, they're saying, "Oh, I tried that, but this," um, or they're focused on what they're going to say next. Right? It's not because we haven't built this level of trust. So no matter how deep you might try to go with them, oftentimes when we're networking, these folks act like they want to hear what you have to say, but often they're just, I hate to say it this way, but they're trying to position themselves as like knowing what they're talking about more. And there's not a genuine trust, there's not a genuine care there. When on the other side of it, when you have a group that you can trust, there was a time where, so I had the second location, and it was at the point where I wasn't making the necessary hard decisions. I needed to make a change in management, and I hadn't done it yet, and I really should have, but that's hindsight. But it was a day where I was just struggling mentally, and I had a couple of problems I wanted to solve, but I literally I texted. I've done this with you, Trevor, too. I did this with Trevor one time. I walked over 100 minutes on my treadmill talking to Trevor about closing my second location. And I did the same thing with Danny one day because he was kind of going through this, or maybe you had already gone through this. But I was able to literally in the middle of the day just pick up the phone and call Danny. And I remember looking at my watch, and I got at least 5,000 steps walking around my backyard because Danny was willing to talk to me for so long and listen to me and help me get all that out, because I can trust him. And he's also at the same time been through some of the stuff that I've been through. So we were both able to kind of come to decisions about things we were doing with our second locations on that call. And then Trevor, it was the same thing with you, man. I was on that treadmill that night, just walking, trying to get like a second like workout in of just walking. And dude, I remember I looked down and I'm like, God bless, dude, I've been on here over 100 minutes just walking because our conversation got so deep, but not off topic. Like it was still beneficial. It wasn't like we were just shooting the shit about football or something like that. Like we were still advancing each other in our businesses because of where we're both at in life and because we have that trust built. And I've just never been able to find that at like random networking events or even at larger conferences, unless you have relationships with those people outside of those conferences.
And the crazy thing about that is that never felt invasive by you doing that. Meaning, like, that's
Yeah.
just, it is because I know when I need to have that 100-minute conversation, I'm a phone call away from it. And that's the cool part, too, is the fact that I don't know, like, we're talking about our groups and our experiences, but I've seen this happen multiple times with new people joining groups and stuff too, where it's like, it's amazing. They just can't believe other business owners will dedicate time to a business that's not their business. It's like, why
Mm-hmm.
would you dedicate this much time when you could be doing, it's like, because by pouring that energy into you, you're going to pour that energy right back into me. I know you will. In a moment when I need that, like we could probably use COVID as a perfect example for every business owner in the world.
Yeah.
Is I would have never made it through COVID if it wasn't for our group, you guys specifically, right? Like because we had to jump on calls to just like support each other long enough to be like, oh my God, we're not going, we're going to survive this, and we all survived it. We all did because not a single person needed to give up because we had enough people in our corner during the hardest time as business owners we'd ever gone through. And so it's just kind of interesting that, and I never once in any of those situations, I think we talked about transactional earlier, is I never felt like, oh my God, like Danny owes me time because I've talked to Danny for this long, or Joe's text me this much and I need he owes. It's never that transaction. It's always like, I'm just glad I could be there for them, when they
Mm-hmm.
need it. 'Cause I know when that time comes, they're going to be there for me too. And I think that's the power. We kind of talked about this thing, start off with like brotherhood versus networking. That is the difference realistically, is real, because we aren't trading people. We live so far away. We're not trading leads for each other. That's not happening. But the idea is that we're still trading time, which is really, really important as entrepreneurs. But if I was to jump on a random call with somebody that had never invested in me, I have like a 30-minute time limit. And I'm like, that's all I got for you, dude. Like, cause I have other things going on. But for you guys, I never even look at the clock. And probably sometimes when we're on calls, I'm like, oh, we should probably get back to work, but it's because like that time doesn't matter to me because it's an investment that is paying tenfold in my life. So.
That distance is a good point. Like, Danny, what do you think? I mean, what's the likelihood of us being similar business models if we were in the same town? What's the likelihood of us collaborating and becoming friends like we have now, as opposed to you living in another place and having a similar business and the relationship that we've built? Like, I think the distance actually benefits us.
I think it puts up that barrier of like, I don't look at you as like competition. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the athlete motivating, like I want to beat you kind of thing. Like I don't have that sense. You know what I mean? Like sure, like we like to push each other and like improve our businesses and see what we can do, but like I'm not like trying to go after the same leads like you said. And I really like where both of you guys are at with like the trust factor. And I guess I didn't even think about it in terms of that until you guys really brought it up. Like there's no way I'm going to open myself up, Trevor, like what you just said with like my time. Like you guys could call me at any point. You know what I mean? Like if you really needed to talk or whatever it is, like I would, if I could, for the most part, I would drop what I was doing to figure it
Mm-hmm.
out. And like I wouldn't do that. My calendar is sacred kind of thing with other people, or at least I try to make it that way. And it's like it leads to those conversations, Joe, like you said. Like I never have that thought of like where I need to express that I know what I'm talking about to you guys, and I have this shield up, so like I never open up or anything there. Like I'm all open. So when you guys call me out or you guys bring things to the table for me, like I'm going to be more receptive to it, and I become a better human being for that, not even just entrepreneur. You know what I mean? So it's just it's so valuable for me personally, at least, to have people like you guys in my corner like that. And I think like if you guys are, you guys are talking to entrepreneurs, men in particular, that go through kind of similar situations or like don't have anybody that they can, kind of connect with and do that. Like what are some things that you guys would say to them to kind of have that same type of, experience or environment around them.
I think that's really hard to do. I think because we've known each other for so many years, like I think to start it, maybe you have to start with some of the things we're talking about that are different for us because the trust isn't built. Like maybe they have to go to an event, maybe they have to go network and get really uncomfortable and slay that dragon, like you were talking about in the last podcast. Um, the internet makes everything so accessible for us. So I'm sure you could at least start something through, like, how many companies have free Facebook groups you can get in and start conversations about your business? I mean, it's a great way if you're going to look for mentoring somewhere, like you can try to get in there, put something out there, and it's not somebody local in your town, so they're not going to necessarily spread rumors about what your business is dealing with in your town, right? Potentially, like, doesn't mean everybody's going to do that, but I think finding some sort of Facebook group or some sort of group online is probably, sounds kind of corny. It almost sounds like online dating, but like if I was going to go do this now, like that's probably what I would do, is something online. I mean, when I was looking for a new mentor for me personally, um, I was literally online going into different private Facebook groups and doing calls with those companies to like interview them and find out if they practice what they preach, how much were they going to hold me accountable, and what were they going to add to my life at that point. And that made a huge difference.
Yeah, I got two perspectives for that. So first one is Joe's online idea. I'm just going to throw a pitch out there is we are creating a Brotherhood online app that will be a community, just like you're talking about, or hopefully by the end of February 2025, it will be done. So if you guys are looking for that, I will have put it back in this link in the future. So if you guys do need something like what Joe's talking about, it will, instead of be a Facebook group, it will just be a group in an app, but same concept. So that's the online version. So the in-person version, the way I've done this, so I moved from Illinois to the mountains in Arizona, and I knew nobody here. It's for me being introverted. I've done a lot of things over my life that put me in uncomfortable situations. I lived in Wales for 6 months. I moved to Australia for a year. I moved to Chicago to build a business, and now I've moved to Arizona to like uproot my life. So I've over those times have had to find different ways to meet and create relationships. Because as an entrepreneur, I don't have a lot of free time, so I have to be very specific about that. So here's kind of some of the things that I've used. I call them community building things first, is I need to build myself a personal community so that I can use that as a way to start meeting people to then be able to build like my tribe in my area specifically. And each area I've moved to, I've always had my tribe. And so this area, I'm still slowly in that process of building it. But here's the tactics that I've used is specifically church has been a good one for me to build community through church. Now, where I currently live, it is an older population. So that's been a lot harder for me to use church as a specific avenue. Because when I say older population, the church, I go to church at 8 a.m. and I am the youngest person by 30 years. And so that's a huge difference. It's not going to be the same conversations that I would have. So that hasn't been always the easiest, but for a lot of communities that works really, really well. Joining something like a gym, like our gyms, we have gyms. Those are great places to start building a community.
That's a good
Um,
point.
yeah, that's what our gyms are. Our gyms are all community building places. Like we
Yeah.
do fitness, but we really create communities, and fitness is just a vehicle for creating community. And I think that's why we do mastermind groups, because we're really good community builders. And so community building is important. So those are two avenues that I've worked. And then the newest avenue I've been using personally has been pickleball. Pickleball has been an awesome spot for me to start to meet people, start to play, because pickleball is one of those interactive things where you can go put your paddle in and just play in a random group. It's very few sports you can do that anymore. And that's a way to build community that's worked really well for me personally to start building out those communities. And so that's step one, is finding where you want that community to be, right? So for me, fitness is an important part. So that's where pickleball and a gym comes in thing, like in our local area here. I haven't joined a CrossFit yet because I have an awesome garage gym, but eventually I will join one just for community purposes, because it's been harder for me to find community in older population area. But those are two ways I'm going to do that. But the other thing that I think is really important, and I think this is a skill set that I do better than most, is you have to cultivate relationships. And so I've always done a good job of personally reaching out to people, sending them cards. Like I do the old school, sending people birthday cards or random Christmas cards, like, because it's showing people I'm intentional about this relationship. And I learned this from one of my best friends who actually passed away a few years ago, but he was he pursued people. meaning like he was always in the pursuit of relationships with people. And I learned from him how he was the guy that had like 1,000 friends. Like, how does this guy have it? And he knows like everything about them. And I was always impressed, like, how did he do this? Is because he pursued people and consistently kept them in his life. By when he would go do something locally, he'd invite a big group of people. Like, would you want to come with me? Hey, I'm going to this. I'm going to go play pick basketball. Come join me, right? And he would pursue people. He would text consistently people. He'd send cards, and I've done a lot of those things beforehand, but I really sought out after he passed and kind of like took lessons from his passing on the reason that at his funeral, it was huge for a guy that was 36 years old when he passed away. It was huge that his funeral was. And it was just everybody that I'd seen, I'd met all of them because Brian brought me to everything. And so he was always like, Trevor, come with me. And so he helped me build community really, really easily because of the fact that like I could pursue these people. So when you're looking for like brotherhoods, I think you got to get yourself in a spot of the like-minded kind of people that you want to be around, right? So, like, if it's entrepreneurship specifically, like our mastermind app would be a great place. Locally, networking groups can be a good starting point. But my other passions are fitness and competitiveness, right? And so I'm putting myself in positions to build community in those positions, as well as church and faith is a strong part that I'm working on as well in my life. So but in those situations, I can't just show up to those. I have to actually be the person that pursues the relationships in those moments. I'm going to be the person that reaches out to the pickleball guys. Hey, like I'm going to play pickleball on Saturday. We usually play on Sunday. You want to join me? Like getting their phone numbers when I'm there, actually saying their names. Like there's a older guy that comes consistently and like his name's Jimmy. And was like, hey, Jimmy, how's like, what's the wife doing? Like and I don't really know the guy. I've only played pickleball with him 3 times, but he said to me the other day, he's like, Trevor, you're the only person I've ever played pickleball that actually knows that I have a wife, because nobody asked that question, right?
Yeah.
And so but I'm pursuing those relationships because I want to have those. I'm not, the one thing my wife always tells me that I do a really good job of is you don't do anything by accident. Everything you do has purpose. And I think that's how I think about relationships too, is specifically I am purposefully going after and intentionally pursuing these people.
I had a similar conversation with a guy. We had our annual client party last weekend, and I met one of my clients' husbands, who's not a member. She is, and he mentioned to me. He said that I've seen your videos on social media, and I can tell that you do things with intention, and that's a valuable trait. Or the conversation went some way like that, and I like that like hit me. I was like, man, that's like how I live my life. I try to have some sort of purpose behind most things that I'm doing, and I try to communicate it in that way because I find that I feel it's more impactful. And when he told me that, I was like, well, great, that means my point's getting across. And then we were able to kind of speak on the same level because he was thinking about the same things. But it was just really interesting to hear that. And then to hear you bring that up, Trevor. And there was even, I was listening to a radio show the other day of a couple of guys who were talking about developing relationships with other men, specifically in church and in the Christian faith, and how sometimes like you go out for coffee with a guy, whatever you're doing, like somebody you got to talk to about something specific, let's say. But if it works out, the relationships are valuable to where you should literally, you want to work on, like, if you want to talk about being uncomfortable, like I'm going to say, hey, Danny, I'd like to pursue a deeper friendship with you. And how do you feel about that? Like, and it's going to get real uncomfortable real quick, but you're intentional and you're forward about what you're thinking, right? Like, it doesn't mean you're going on a date or anything like that, but it just means it should open up. It breaks down a barrier, right? Like that was hard for me to even just say as situational right here on this podcast, but it was an interesting tip that I've never heard. I've heard very few men give to other men. I think that could help a lot of people, especially if you're lonely, like it can get when you're a business owner.
Cool, guys. So let's go ahead and wrap up today's podcast. I think, the conversation really started off with the idea that what is brotherhood versus networking? And I think we kind of labeled it the fact that like it's real relationships versus transactional relationships. I think that's really the difference between the two. And kind of ended with the fact that like, I think all of us have been intentionally pursuing relationships with people by dedicating time that's different than like, again, transactional is probably the best word. Then I'm not trying to jump on a call because I'm going to get a business sale out of this. I'm just jumping on a call because this person needs me in my life. And this can be done obviously through business. And we're talking through an entrepreneur perspective, but this can be done in all aspects of a man's life, right? Like Joe brought up like the faith-based conversation with, you see somebody at church that you really respect how they're living their life. see if they'll go do a coffee. And if they're living the life that you want to live, that person will probably do a coffee with you because they probably see something in you a little bit and respect the fact that you're willing to take the time out of your day to meet with them as well. I think for most men, probably most people in general, men specifically, I think all of us are wanting more relationships than we realize. It's just we don't have time. It realistically comes down to a time issue more than anything. But once you start to find people that are worth finding time for in your life, you will find time. You guys got any other things you want to add to that before we wrap up?
I think that, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I would just echo that really. I think it's definitely for me, like why I haven't pursued other friendships or relationships, things like that, is the time. But I think it's also more the value of the time, meaning like I know a lot of the trust factor that I have with you guys, like that takes so long to build up, and the value that I get from it is I just feel like it's very hard to find anywhere else. So I look at the value to time ratio, I guess, if you will, of me going out and seeking other friends or things like that. When I mean, me personally, I kind of got all I need right here a lot of the times with you guys. So
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us on today's podcast. We'll see you on the next one. That was a great conversation with Danny and Joe about how our friendship, our brotherhood, has taken us farther in success than we could ever imagined. If you have somebody that you would want to be in a brotherhood with you, send them off this video so they have a better idea of what we're talking about. As always, like and subscribe. Follow us on these socials at Brotherhood Beyond Business. I'm going to go ahead and leave us with a closing quote. Your net worth isn't just measured in dollars. It's measured in the quality of relationships you build. Invest in brotherhood.